topic is going to be, I think, a fun one for a lot of you. Myself, I'll give you all a little bit of background of my cred, and for any of you out there that can relate, great. So I started my career in sales, really when I got to college. In college, I worked for a telemarketing company. And so I had to call people up and I had to get people to a timeshare pitch vacation. So for those of you who don't know what that's like, it's like, I've got to convince you to go to Tunica, Mississippi for two nights and 3 days. And then I'd throw in a bunch of perks. And it was only like $35, right? But I had to make sure that you gave me your credit card number over the phone. So that was the big thing. I literally had to convince you to give me your credit card number over the phone. So that was not necessarily like always the easiest thing to do. So, but what I found is very early, I was very good at, I was okay with like being humble, getting hung up on, all the things around like having a thick skin, I was relatively serviceable at. So yeah, so I found I had kind of a natural ability to do that. Now, I didn't realize the process of sales until much later in my life. I was probably 26. I was working at a company called Career Builder. Many of you, if you follow me, you've probably heard a version of the story. Shout out to my Career Builder people, if there are any out there, since I'll be in Chicago. Hit me up. That's where the HQ is. So let's see. Shane calling in from Colorado Springs. What's going on, Shane? I say calling in, but I think it's just because it's like old legacy mindset. Like nobody's actually calling in. Right. Well, you are actually, maybe you all are on your phone, but I guess it's still not technically a call in. Feel free, like I said, drop where you're joining from. Also, if you have any questions, I try to monitor the comments and chat as well. So as I go through this, feel free to be selfish. We're going to spend 30 minutes together. I'm going to share my top 5 habits of highly successful salespeople. Some of them you will be able to relate to. Some of them you might be like, this dude is insane. There we go. Birmingham, Alabama is in the house. I'm sure they're getting excited, man. Football season's kicking off. Alabama actually opens up here in Austin versus Texas. I don't know how it's going to go for Texas. Let's put it that way. Brandon, I think you and I both know how it's going to go for Texas there. So, all right, we're going to jump into it. So my number one most successful trait that I see in top performers, and again, I'll toss myself in that hat, is be creative and break shit, right? So what do I mean by that? I'll tell a story about my very first job in sales. Okay, my very first job in post-college. So post-college, I got a job with the Tampa Bay Rays. Yeah, Shane, it was rough, but honestly, I had a lot of fun with it because like I'm calling like so many people telemarketing, like I finally realized, like, who cares if they hang up on me? Like, who cares? And so I think that mindset made me successful. So my first job after college was with the Tampa Bay Rays, who at the time were the worst team in Major League Baseball. And I was selling season tickets, premium tickets, suites, things like that. And so imagine you're the worst team in baseball, and it's the worst stadium in Major League Baseball. Okay. I mean, look, shout out to all the Rays fans. I love you out there. Let's be honest. I've been to all, I can say that because I've been to every single Major League Baseball stadium. That's just like a fun Jake fact. If you didn't know, I have been to every single Major League Baseball stadium. So after the first season, our inbound phone loop, some of you are going to love this. Some of you are going to like hate me for this maybe. So I got promoted 3 times. I moved from group ticket sales to then after group season tickets, then I moved to account executive. Then I moved to senior account executive within the first year 16 months, year to 16 month ish. So I got promoted really quickly. I was doing really well. And how the inbound phone loop work was this. It was basically like a circle, okay, like this. And so what would happen is if my counterpart was on the phone and I wasn't, it would skip them, come to me. So like think of like a really janky version of a round robin. That's probably the best way to put it. So the reason I say be creative, break shit. So then again, I'm already be creative. And again, I'm gonna give a counterbalance to this story too. Try new things. I want LinkedIn to take it down because I typed break shit. Although I don't think they really care. I've noticed that. So what I did at the end of the season is this. I looked in our CRM, which was junk at the time, And I did a scatter plot. And I don't know, I was not the best student, but I love stats for some reason. I don't know. I did a scatter plot of every single inbound phone call like that converted from the entire season before. So basically in the off season, I did an analysis. I just pulled up the data. And what I found is that there were these spots like right before lunch, like 11 to 11:30, then later like 2 to 2:30, then like 4 to 4:30. So there are these spots that nobody called in. And so in my mind, I'm like, why don't I just make all my cold calls during those times and then clean up on the inbound front? And so that's what I did. So starting that next Monday, I'm just sitting there. I'm doing like some emails. I'm working. I'm not like being lazy. And so it probably took, I'm like, Tampa Bay Rays, it's Jake. So I'm getting all the inbound. So all my counterparts, there's probably 12 of us, are making calls. And so because they're making calls, all the inbounds are just getting routed to me. Then at 11 to 11:30, I start cranking my calls because I know statistically people are less likely to call in. Then I stop. All the inbounds come to me. Then I start cranking calls again. And after like 2 or 3 days, and I might have been even on day one, people are like, Jake, what are you doing? Like, why are you getting all the inbound calls? I literally pulled up my spreadsheet. I go, guys, look, because nobody calls in during these times. So I'm just going to make all my calls here. They're like, well, that's not fair. I'm like, what do you mean it's not fair, guys? I did the analysis. You all of you, I literally showed, these are my peers, I showed them the data. I said, you guys are more than welcome to do exactly what I'm doing. Statistically, you should do exactly what I'm doing, statistically. And guess how many of them did it? None. About 2 or 3 weeks later, they changed the phone tree system. But that was my beginning on this idea of like, I'm always thinking about what's something new I can test. What's something new? Establish a baseline first. So that's the key here. I want everyone to say this. Christopher, what's up, man? Yeah, DM me. Would love to try to catch up, maybe grab a coffee when I'm in town. We'll have to look at my schedule tomorrow, but definitely shoot me a DM and we can try to connect. So that was when I first learned this idea of that. And so how that manifests today is just think about A/B testing. You know, once you establish a baseline of success, something that works, then start to iterate. The problem that I see with a lot of people when it comes to be creative is they're always creative. That's bad too. Instead, what you want to do is establish a baseline process and then start to A/B test. This goes back to like, I love chemistry, this whole scientific method. You know, you can't, what you can't do is you can't test too many variables because then you don't know which one worked. And so I'm all for, so again, I tested this inbound, etc. So for all of you out there, my number one trait of highly successful salespeople, it's not that they're these crazy creatives always doing it. That's not what I'm saying. They have great best practice baselines, and then they're always trying new things to get better. And that's where I was able to destroy people really early in my career, is I had a baseline process that I could execute. And then I'd hear my peer or somebody else saying something like they were spitting it a different way. And I would go, oh, that's good. I'm going to steal that. And then I'd bolster on that piece. I'd read a book. Ooh, that's good. I'm going to add that to here. And so, you know, I really had this kind of standardized process, but also, you know, was able to iterate. So Shane had a human bio degree. Yeah, exactly. If you kind of understand the basics of the scientific method, then you'll understand this. Okay. Next up. So number one is be creative, try new things, but build a foundation first. Big caveat. Number two, I'll just type it in here. Number two is utilize your team. Okay. So I've got crazy stories about this. You don't need to do it all, especially for any of you out there doing mid-market or enterprise sales. You are crazy. I leveraged my sales leader, my VP, my CEO, depending on the company I was at. I would just toss them out there and I would just sit back. Great salespeople, write this down. Great salespeople are great quarterbacks. Okay? Great salespeople are great quarterbacks. They realize it's not my job to play every position. I can't go also be the GM and the coach and the wide receiver and the running back. Football season's on the way, so I'm pretty pumped for the Chiefs this year. So think about that for 2 seconds. It's not your job to try to do it all. In fact, it's absolutely silly to try to do it all. All right, I'll tell you about a really great one of the success moments early in my career. I get a note. I had Intel in my patch. I was 29 in San Francisco. I was the youngest at the time national account executive. So out of 70 plus national accounts, I think I was definitely the youngest by like 10 to 20 years. And our North American CEO hit me up and it's like, I just heard the CEO of Intel speak. Hit him up and set me up a meeting. Like, sure, Brent. Yeah, great. I'll set you up a meeting. The CEO of Intel. I'm 29. You know what I mean? So anyway, long story short. So I reach out, like I'm told, etc. And do you think that I tried to book the meeting? No, I leveraged Brent. And then sure enough, a week later, I got a call back from his office. We ended up getting a meeting with the VP of talent acquisition for Intel. I don't even know how many. I mean, this person is responsible for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, right? So we got a pilot in, we closed a big deal. I didn't try to position myself. I said, hey, I want to set up a meeting for these two people, even though I was a national account executive, the top tier rep at the company, right? Guess what? Probably 6 months later, CEO of Kimpton Hotels. If you all know Kimpton, hey, my CEO is going to be in town and wants to meet. I didn't try to set up a meeting for myself. I never did. So when I became an enterprise rep, I stopped trying to set meetings for myself. I just set meetings for my leaders. And then, because I'm like, man, the chances of me being able to hold my own are very little. So the same thing, the other part. So I'll just tell you this, like the two big ones on this one. So I'm going to say 2A and 2B. 2A is leverage CS early. This is another tactic that I did that crushed. And then leverage, what's my second one? Leverage CS early. And then, yeah, I'll just do leverage leaders to prospect. Again, I didn't make them try to set up a meeting with me. I instead was like, hey, I'm just facilitating a meeting. And I'm telling you, especially for all of you that work at a startup, if any of you work at a startup or even a larger company, your RVP, if you're at a big company, or your CEO at a small company is more than happy to help you get on a phone and close a big deal, or go fly out to San Francisco to go meet with a VP of what could be $1 million+ account for you. The other thing I did is I leveraged CS. So what I realized early in my career is the main reason, right? So you can just fact check this for yourself and see how it feels. The main reason and the main competitor that we lose deals is no decision. It's not some other person over here. It's like, nah, status quo is good enough. So, and then why do companies come to that, mindset? Well, let me tell you what happens if you all don't know, is what happens after you put together your proposal and your pitch, blah, blah, blah. These people get in a room together virtually now, and they say, what do we think? And then after that, they go, who's going to own this? And then the person who's the champion is like, oh, man, I got a lot on my plate. It's like maybe sometimes they'll go to bat for you, sometimes they won't. So what I found is that when you loop CS in early, then they could say something to the effect of like, we're going to take care of this. And this is what I trained my team on. When I left Career Builder and took over as the head of sales at Glassdoor, what I trained my team on is in the proposal meeting, what we would do is we'd say, look, once we got past what we thought that they should buy, we'd say, let's talk about go live. And then we said this verbatim. And the best part, our team is going to do all the work. And then we'd walk them through it. It didn't mean our team it meant our team is going to project manage it. And so for any of you doing any type of complex deals, utilize your CS team, bring them to that call. So they're like, oh, I'm going to be taken care of. They're going to make sure I'm successful. So that way, when they get in that meeting, they're like, oh, it's going to be easy. Jake and their team is going to do it. So utilize your team. That's number one. All right. Ooh, this is this is so good. This is so good. Confidence. Okay. All right. Next one is confidence wins. Okay. So whether this is about you setting meetings or this is about you in the sales process, there is a difference. And I feel like so many people have this twisted. There's a difference between confidence and cocky and arrogant. They are not the same thing, those three things. Run that back. If you're sitting there and you're saying, well, Jake, I want to be more confident, but I don't want to be cocky or arrogant. They're not. Stop thinking that they're synonyms. They're not. Confidence, again, confidence comes from different places for different people. For me, I can tell you for me, confidence comes in preparation and knowledge. I feel confident. And anybody who's worked for me, if anybody's joined the live now that has worked for me, you can attest to this. I am a preparation monster. If we have a big meeting coming up, we are going to prep our faces off for it. We are going to role play out every scenario that could possibly happen. So then when I get in the meeting, I'm free. I can just execute. I'm not thinking about, because I already thought about what happens if IT starts to go, well, how does this integrate with our current system? You're just like, ugh, I already knew Larry was going to do that. You know what I mean? So like, if I already knew Larry was going to do that, why didn't I prep for that? It actually shocks me how salespeople get into sales deals and they get surprised by some question or objection. You're like, how many times have you heard that same question? Then why are you surprised by it? Prepare for it. Expect it. I'm like, look, if everything goes swimmingly, I know how to handle that meeting. So I don't prep for the rose-colored glasses meeting. I prep for the meeting where I'm going to get my face punched in. I prep for the meeting with the most difficult buyers I'm ever going to buy. And I'm going to look at their LinkedIn profile. How long have they been someplace? All these other things. Okay. So prep. So for me, confidence comes, my ability to be present comes from my preparation and knowledge and research that I'll do about somebody's industry, what those businesses do, a genuine caring of trying to help these people. So that's where my confidence comes from. So I don't say things like, is now a good time? Oh, at the very beginning. At the end, I might thank someone and say, hey, thanks. I really enjoyed the conversation, if I enjoyed the conversation. But I'm not going to say things like at the very beginning, oh, hey, yeah, John, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet. I know you're really busy. Do you know what that says about you? Do you know that how that shows that you value your own time? Not as much as theirs. And so confidence is not about being cocky or arrogant. There's ways to say this in a way. It's like, hey, I'm excited for the conversation, John. I've done my research and here's what I understand, but I want to spend the first 5 or 10 minutes. Each of our clients is different in terms of how they think about XYZ, understanding a few of your nuances, because obviously the way that you operate is different. Right? I'm telling you right now, in any life situation, if it's with a friend, if it's with a first date is my favorite example of this. If it's with a first date, can you imagine doing that? Can you imagine sitting down at a table for a first date? Julie, oh, thank you so much for taking the time to go on this date with me. I know you're busy and thank you for carving out time. Yuck. I'm telling you, buyers feel the exact same way. They feel yuck. When they hear you be like kind of desperate or overly thanking someone, we as humans are like, dude, okay, I know if someone overthanks me for their time, the chances it's going to be a high quality conversation are about zero. It's the people that come in confident and are like, look, Jake, here's what I understand about the business. I'm looking forward to the conversation. There's ways to say thank you, but most people just do it this very, kind of pathetic way. So be confident. You are an expert. You should know more about your product and the niche in the industry than the buyer does, or you shouldn't be selling it. Go sell something that you can do that with. Doesn't matter if you're 26 or they're 46. If you're 26, you need to get up to speed on how you help those buyers so you can have smart conversations. So for me, again, number 3 is confidence wins. You got to understand, where does your confidence? If I said, look, I need you to be able to have a conversation with somebody who's 20 years older with you and be confident, what are 3 things that you would need to do to get there? And think about that from a confidence standpoint and where your base comes from. I know mine. It's prep and knowledge. That if I prepped, I'm confident. I've done it tens of thousands of times for sales meetings, so I don't have to continue to do it. All right, you all, number 4 here, successful habits. This one, please, if you've been taking side notes before, this is one that I think will really impact your lives. 80, and you've heard me. I posted about this not too long ago, actually, maybe not for the first time. It's called the 80-15-5 mindset. This skill in particular, if I think about, and again, a lot of these things you don't realize that you're doing them consistently until after you realize it. But here's what 80-15-5 means. It means in my daily and weekly activities, 80% of my time is spent on things that are going to impact the near term. That could be the next few weeks, month, 6 weeks, etc. 15% of my time is spent on activities to impact the midterm, 3 months, just 3 to 6 months roughly from now. 5% of my time is spent doing things that will make me more successful 6 months from now, or longer, 6 months, a year, 24 months. It's not the other way around. It's not where I'm doing all this stuff now. 80, 15, 5. And so what this looks like in practice, okay? What this looks like in practice, all right, is a few different things here. One, it means that I have time, and just so you know, today is actually that day for me, Monday. I have time, and I can just tell you what my calendar looks like today. We are going to be launching, and by the way, if any of you are interested in this, please drop a quick why in the comments. In 2014, I was the first. I launched what we called in New York, it was Startup Sales School. And what it was a series of our best practices. We've worked with thousands of companies. And if you don't have the bandwidth to train your own reps, or if you're a solo entrepreneur, or you're just a rep who wants to invest, it's a 4-week program that will basically have a series of sessions, homework, and really is grounded in modern best practices. This isn't like generic BS. So if you're interested in more about Startup Sales School, let me know. We're launching that here probably into September. So guess what? That for me is my at this point, it's like in the 15% bucket because I know it's probably not going to really launch until October. So I'm spending an hour today doing more planning around it, right? What's a 5%? Oh, perfect 5% one. January 2023 goals. What are the things that I want to make sure that I have accomplished personally? I've got an hour blocked out for that. I've got an hour blocked out for how to utilize or underutilize people. That's definitely clearly in that 15% bucket. It's not going to impact anything now, but it could impact things in 4 months, 5 months, etc. So my friends, think about it that way, all right? 80% of your week, if you are constantly, I'm just going to tell you this. Let me tell you a recipe for disaster. If you are constantly going 90 to 95% of your time spent on things now, what you are guaranteeing is your future is going to be horrific. You are guaranteeing that your future is, you're going to be, I call it being on the wheel. If you're not doing things today, that is going to, the mindset I use is, I said, I do things today to make future Jake's life easier. You know, I do small little things today that I know Jake in 3 to 6 months will be like, thank God I started this thing then and am not scrambling to do it now. So all of you in your sales careers need to think about that. What's the skill set that you need to do? What's a 5% skill set? You know, I'm not that good at executive conversations. Okay, well, every week, are you spending an hour on talking to executives or understanding more? So for everyone there, I want you to think about that. That is my rule. I think I read the book. There's a book called the 80-20 principle, which is called the Pareto principle, which is like not that, but maybe somehow that's what triggered it. I don't know. But Pareto principle is different. It says that 20% of the things you do impact 80% of the outcomes. So just some things for you all to think about. So yeah, if any of you have questions about that one in particular, feel free to drop them in. I do see, hold on, I see we actually had a question in the chat. I missed it. So again, if you all have questions, we're going to be rocking for about another 5-10 minutes. What is the best way to manage up to leadership that sees being creative as a detriment? Ooh, Shane, such a good question. Okay. So I'm going to paraphrase Shane's question, and feel free if you all have more questions like this, as I'm kind of telling you like the 5 successful habits of the best salespeople. So Shane, here's what I do. Here's what I've done in the past that worked. It never didn't work, and I've given it advice, and people have said it's worked. Maybe it's not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time. When you're worried about my boss won't let me be creative, and this goes back to the number one. It's the number one trait of highly successful salespeople. Here's what I do. I go to my boss up front, Shane, and here's what I say to her or him. Hey, John, look, one, I already know that I'm at I know that I'm at a good spot executing the baseline. That's what I'm just going to tell you that right now. You have to earn the right to have the conversation. So for me, I'm like, all right, once I get to the baseline, and I'm going to have that conversation with my boss, I'm going to say, look, I have a few ideas for ways that I think this can actually be like next level successful that wouldn't just impact or help me. I think it'll help the team. So here's what I'd like to do. I know that these are our kind of minimums or things that we need to do. I will do those, but I also want 5-10% of my time to be able to go try a couple of new things. And if in 3 to 4 weeks it's not working, I'll go back to 100% that. Does that work for you, John? I've never had a leader say no. Because here's what I'm saying. I'm not I'm not telling John that I won't do the minimums. I'm saying, yeah, I'll do that and I'll do this. Right? Again, this is a perfect example of a 15 or a 5% activity. It might not, it's going to make my life a little tougher in the short term. But short term, Jake is actually trying to tee it up to where, God, my life in like 45 days, once I pull this off, is going to be way better. So this is a mix of like, the whole reason I want to be creative is so I can be smarter and not have to just grind as hard in 6 months or 3 months or whatever it is. So that's the conversation that I have, Ryan. I've seen it be very successful. Hey, John, I want to make I want to offer up something. I think I have 2 different ideas that are going to change the way that we do this. And guess what? It'll impact all the team. Everyone will be better. With that said, I know we have baselines. So for the next month, I'm going to commit to get to those baselines, right? And I want to be able to try this in addition. Does that work for you? There are very, very, very few leaders that will say no to that. I mean, yeah, you got to be you are not cool if you say no to that. And like I said, it hasn't happened that way. All right, number 5. Let's see here. What's up? Let's see. Emily, let me know if this is resonating as well too. We're getting some comments in here, but I always like the questions too, so appreciate it, Emily. All right. Her question, how would you shape your week as a relatively new SDR targeting new business, looking to get promoted in the next 4 months? Okay, well, one, Emily, if you've been there for 4 months, do not set the expectation that you're going to get promoted. So that would be my first thing, okay? But, I mean, shit, look, I want it to happen for you. So, Emily, here's what I do. And again, this is how I got promoted. I'm going to share this with you. This goes, anybody can use this piece of advice. The first thing that you need to realize is this. Your manager doesn't promote you. Your manager's boss promotes you, right? Or in this case, your manager doesn't promote you to AE. A director promotes you to AE or a manager. So it's not, your boss has to like you, obviously. I'm not going to suggest you get promoted. But one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they don't go straight to the source and just ask. So, Emily, if I was going to do this, I was going to have the conversation. I would go identify the AE manager of the team that I would potentially roll into. I would obviously talk to my boss too. And I'd go to my boss, and I've had this conversation, and I'll tell you, again, I'll just share. These are all life experiences here. These aren't theory. I'll give you the advice, and I'll tell you the story. I would go to the boss and say, look, obviously, okay, you've already been there 8 months, so this is like a year or some. Okay, good. Got it. I would go to this AE manager or the director and say, look, I'm looking to get promoted to AE in a few, I'd like to get there in the next 4 months, or you could say 3 months just to kind of shorten it. Obviously, I know you're going to be looking for 2 things. One, did I hit my numbers, on a consistent basis? That's table stakes. Number 2, do I have a positive attitude? Am I training? Am I helping my team members? Obviously, that's a no given. What are the other 2 things that you look for so that in 2 to 3 months, it's a no-brainer for you? Right? Too many people think that they'll just sit there and because they hit big numbers, they'll just get picked like a special flower. That's not how getting promoted works. I need to know the unstated expectations of my boss's boss so I can engineer toward that. Not just sit there, headset on, making calls, doing whatever as an SDR. So, Emily, that's what I would do. So that's what I did at Career Builder. This is back in the day. I was an account executive. I had been there for maybe 2 or 3 months. I'd already done some leadership in previous roles. I went to the director of sales at the time, who was my boss's boss. I said, hey, I want to move into leadership, when the next opening comes up. And, I'd literally only been at the company for, I think, like three months, maybe. I've already done it before. I've been successful. What are the things that you look for? He said, 1, obviously, are you hitting your numbers? 2, are you hitting your activity numbers? Well, keep in mind, whenever I was in AE, we had to do our own prospecting and close our own deals. So, right. So I had activity metrics as an AE. And are you being a positive influence on your team? He's like, Jake, if you are hitting your numbers consistently leading the team in activity and, helping those around you, etc., that's what I'm looking for. So guess what happened? My boss got let go about a month and a half later. I've been at the company now for 5 months. There's somebody who had been at the company for 2.5 years and transferred from the Chicago office to Phoenix to help to seed the office. And that's who I went up against in the interview. I put together a business plan for my territory. That's another tip that I'll give you Emily, is if you have any idea that the territory you're going into, I would put together a business plan around that. Maybe I'll do a whole LinkedIn live on that, which is like how to nail any job interview with a business plan. I did this from like my very first job, and I got every job I did this with. But LinkedIn live, interview business plan. Okay. Just making notes so I don't forget that. So anyway, guess what happened? I got the job. I'd been there 4 months. She'd been there 2.5 years. Because I said, look, Evan, out of all the new hires in your last year, I'm number one. And again, this is out of like a lot of reps. Activity, I'm crushing my activities every day. And by the way, this person had been there for a while, so she was not. She was coasting. 3, here, and I've led 4 trainings for my team in the last whatever. And here's a business plan for I'm going to grow my territory. Done. I got the job. So Emily, reverse engineer outcomes. This is for any of you. Okay. And again, make sure 80, 15, 5. Are you spending 15 or 5% of your time now to start to get the skills to where you're not asking to be hired and then you'll learn the skills? You're doing it now. So Emily, another pro tip for you. This is for all my SDRs out there. What I would do is I would go to the AE manager. I'd probably go to my boss first. And I'd say, hey, look, obviously for you to promote me to account executive, you're going to want to know that I can run a proper discovery call. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to propose that for the next 5 discovery calls, I'll listen in. And by the way, my manager, this will not distract me from doing my own prospecting. I will still hit all my own numbers. And if I don't hit that, then I won't do this. And then what I'd like to do is after the first 5, assuming the account executive's comfortable, I'd like to potentially ask a few of the questions to start to get experience there. So that way, whenever I come to your team, I'm going to be prepared. Does that work for you? Again, I'm going to put in the work. I'm going to demonstrate to you that I can crush it. And then we'll go from there. So there you go. These are all the tips that I've used to get pretty much every job I ever interviewed for. All right, here we go. This is maybe an extension of it. Okay, this is an extension of it. And this is actually a really great, career advice, in general. So this is basically digging into that 5% mindset. I got my undergrad at Missouri State University. At the time, it was actually called Southwest Missouri State University. I think we were the largest or second largest bi-directional college in the U.S. We had like 20,000 undergrads, so it wasn't like a small school. But I didn't really start paying attention to college until like the last year and a half. And, it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, get your shit together. So I didn't have a great GPA. I really didn't go to college to learn, if I'm just being candid. I mean, I enjoyed parts of college. And realized that there was just so much I didn't know. And, going to a school like that, and if you live in Missouri or Oklahoma or Arkansas, like it's great. But when you go to the coast or you go somewhere else, they're like, most people on the coast in California, and this is facts, most people in California and New York cannot even point to Missouri on a map. Okay. I've done this with people on my team. I'm like, show me where Missouri is. And they're like, they just pick Iowa. Some of them people pick like Minnesota. So anyway, I knew that I was not going to go back. And so Career Builder opened up a program for me to get my MBA. I'm a frontline sales manager at the time. And then they would pay for it if I hit certain criteria. And so I went back to Arizona State. I worked full time, went to school full time, and in 18 months got my MBA. I didn't need that then, but I knew deep down that I needed a better polish. I needed to have better perspective and understand business. So when I went to get my MBA, 99% of people don't even know I have an MBA because I don't talk about it. I didn't go to get an MBA to put MBA on my LinkedIn profile. I went to learn. I went to learn how different types of people think. I learned to learn different skill sets. And then about a year, I guess it wouldn't have been a year, it would have been like toward the end, right as I was graduating, I was like, okay, look, last 2 years, I've been the #1 inside sales manager in percent to quota in a row, 2 years in a row. I'm going into my 3rd year. I'm at like the 2. And I'm like, okay, what's the next promotion for me? Well, the next promotion for me is going to be, I'm already managing deals that are similar size, reps that are similar level of experience. So I'm like, next role for me is probably an AVP, which is an area vice president. And I was like, okay, I was 28 at the time, something like that. Yeah, probably 28. I'm like, I've got to get enterprise sales experience. I knew that if I wanted to go and lead grown-ass men and women who are like 15, 20 years younger than me, I had to have walked the walk. right? I couldn't just sit there and say like, oh, this is how you should close an enterprise deal. So that's what I did. So I left my my cushy management job, went back into the field for a year. I very specifically remember the conversation of when I knew I was going to leave Career Builder. I'd been there for almost 4 years. I loved the company, amazing for my career. And Glassdoor came knocking. There were 20 people at Glassdoor at the time, something like that. Nobody in sales. And I interviewed. And so look at the things that I'd done over the last 3 years. I went back and got my MBA. I had enterprise sales experience. I had successful sales leadership experience, a proven track record. And I was still hungry, right? And so I interviewed. They were in late stages with a few other people. And I got the job. And I got the job because I started putting in the work. Guess what? My boss didn't have to tell me to do this. Like, your company is not 100% responsible for your professional development. Newsflash, you are. Now, you should find companies that will invest in you, like Career Builder, etc. We invest in our people too, and they want to get certified and other things. So for anyone that kind of like thinking through some of these like traits here, I was starting to do the work to round corners 2 to 3 years in advance. I didn't know that it would lead me to become a VP of sales at a company that became a unicorn. I didn't have that much foresight, but I did know my own skill sets. I knew where I was strong, where I was weak, and I started to do things today to make myself sharper down the road. And so that's the advice that I give everyone. So for you, Emily, this is you're perfect for this. So you want to be an AE, great. Or if that I think that's the move, right? I always say, great. What's the next step? So the things that you're going to do over the next X years, what are they going to prepare you for? What do you actually want to do? And so is this actually the right path for you? So that is thinking 2 to 3 years ahead. You don't have to know like what you want to do with your life in 5 years. That's kind of silly, right? I knew that I wanted to be leading a sales organization and have enterprise sales experience. That's what I knew. And what that ended up equaling out to be was that I was qualified to be an early stage startup VP of sales. I didn't know that. I didn't even have any plans. Even though I lived in San Francisco, I didn't even plan to work in a startup. And I'll tell you the other part about this that I just started telling, like this part of the story. When I got the offer letter, I knew the guy. They forgot to take the other guy's name off the offer letter. I knew this guy. He was almost 20 years older than me. So I got the job over him, 20 years older than me, right? Why? Because I put in the work early. Right? I still had the hunger, was ready to go get it, etc. So anyway, those are my top 5. If you want to be successful, I'll recap them for you real quick. Okay. Number 1, be creative and always start looking for the next thing. Number 2, utilize your team. It is not your job to get every single part of the sales process. Now, don't be lazy. Really, I think of it as like expert project management. That great salespeople because I'm also very good at project managing their side. Because once I know the players that are involved, I can then say, okay, we need Lucy on this call, Johnny on this call, etc. Be confident when you talk to people. Confident. Make sure you sell a product that you care about, that you want to go deep on, that you want to learn, so you can be confident. All right? 80, 15, 5. 80% spent on the now, 15 in the next 3 to 6 months, 5% in the long term, which leads into the number 5 is you've got to start to think ahead. If you're constantly doing things only for today's benefit, you will never reap long-term rewards or make things easier for yourself. So always think, what's my next step? What am I doing today to prepare myself, not just for the next step, but because I got to start doing the little things now. I can't get to the opportunity and then be like, oh shit, here's the opportunity. That's what a lot of people do. They show up for a job interview. They're like, well, once I get the job, I'll learn X. No. I'd already, Emily, like the skill I'd be focused on is I already want to know how to run a killer discovery and demo as an SDR. I would be training myself now. I don't need my company to tell me to do it. I don't need a boss. Why? Because I want to come in and start crushing that job. And I want to get that job over my other SDR peers. Because then if I go up and I start learning how to do a disco now, I start learning how to do a demo, learning how to put together a proposal on my own time. Then I get to that interview process. I'm like, look, why don't we just role play the discovery process? Let's just do it right now, John. And John's gonna be like, okay. And then your peers are going to be like, well, I don't know how to run a discovery process. Okay. All right, let's go to the next. Let's run a demo right now. Your peers are like, I don't know how to run a demo. Okay, let's put together a proposal right now. Show you can do the job that you want tomorrow, today. That's another good quote. You can steal that one too. So for everyone out there, do these 5 things. If you do these 5 things, I promise you're going to be wildly, wildly, wildly successful.